All right, welcome everybody. Ahmad's coming up to the stage as well. And yeah, we're getting started a couple minutes late here, but I know people are still trickling in. My name's Jonathan Greachin, co-founder and CEO of the Founder Institute. We are a global pre-seed startup accelerator. We work with companies at the idea stage. Founded in Silicon Valley, we operate in over 200 cities and 100 countries around the globe. But as I was just mentioning to Azleen and Ahmad, you know, at Founder Institute, in my role, we kind of work at this as this third party, right? All of the chapter leaders that end up running our programs come to us. It's organic, and then we try to give them the tools on the ground to build their ecosystems into something that's sustainable. So, you know, I have sort of this third-party perspective, but I was definitely inspired by reading some of the stories of Azleen and Ahmad because, number one, they're on the ground actually doing it, and number two, they've faced some pretty big hardships as well, and honestly, I've just been impressed and inspired by the amount of things that you guys have been able to accomplish. So, with that said, Azleen, if you want to take a moment to introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, or good morning, I think it still is. My name is Azleen Carrington. I'm the founder and CEO of what we call Innovate Guyana. It's made up of the Economic Development Fund, which is a private entity, a registered corporation in Guyana. It's also made up of the Caribbean Diaspora Angel Investor Network, which is based in the US, and a boatload of other things. Essentially, we are an incubator, an accelerator, and capital provider to startups and growing micro-businesses in Guyana.
So let me just fill in some blanks there too. So you have, because she's being modest, the Guyana Economic Development Trust, a Guyana Innovation Prize, the Caribbean Diaspora Angel Investor Network. You are spearheading the Startup Huddle effort, and then you also have Innovate Guyana, which is, I believe, like a media channel of sorts to highlight some of the stories and things like that.
Yeah, we have a TV channel on YouTube.
Awesome. Okay.
If they won't highlight you, this is literally, I'm not kidding, you have to build what you want. So if you want to promote your startups, you have to build the tools and the channels to do that. So we've literally built a TV channel to promote our startups.
Wow. Amazing. And I know, Ahmad, you've written books and you've done a lot of the same things in terms of just bringing awareness and starting to tell the stories of your community. But let me let you introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Ahmad. I recently appointed as a GP for Black Box. It's a founder-focused program. We try to champion founders from all across the world, give them the network, resources, learnings, funding they need to build their own ecosystems all across. In my background, I'm born all my life in Syria. I'm a founder myself, started working on a company that later had to shut down because of the war and what's happening, and since then lived in multiple places. Was passionate about building startup communities, especially in conflict, fragile states, giving my background in my country, and then later my passion was also to follow those people who flee those conflicts and worked to take their ideas and become an entrepreneurs and worked in some other places as a refugees founder. I wrote those books about entrepreneurship in conflict, entrepreneurship in exile, to document those relations. Very happy to be here with you to talk about startup communities and how we build this community and how we build a startup ecosystem. An honor to be next to you too.
Awesome. And we were just discussing this outside too. I know that the title of this panel is How to Build Your Startup Community Anywhere. But you know, in this post-COVID world, these communities do not have to be tethered to a specific location, right? And I think that's something that you've really been able to do. You know, I think with the refugee community in general, with Syrian diaspora, essentially, is building this community and building programs to bring them together, to tell their stories, and to help them build great businesses. So yeah, I think in this post-COVID world, we're not tethered to specific locations anymore. So I'll start first with Azleen. You know, something that I've definitely learned in being kind of this third party and helping ecosystems grow is that the motivations behind some of the people that are starting to build these ecosystems is super important, right? If you're in it for the short term, if you're in it to, starting to look at a P&L in a year or two, then this isn't the right this isn't the right activity for you, right? So I'd love to hear, Asleen, your motivations kind of, how you started to get involved, because I know you were working at some Fortune 500 companies and things like that.
Yeah, it's actually because of that. I hated that work. And I'm not kidding. So I'm an immigrant. I'll make this very quick. I'm an immigrant from Guyana. When my parents left for the U.S., I was extremely unhappy. I stayed with my grandparents, my brothers and I, and then eventually they came to get us. And I was telling somebody earlier, I bawled for the 7-hour flight to the U.S. And I love living in the U.S. I love being a U.S. citizen, but I have always felt very compelled to go back home. My parents were Pan-Africanists back in the 60s and 70s. That's when I was born, in the 60s. And I always knew that I would go back. So the first motivation is a deeply internal one. It's home, and you have to do something for the place that you live and loved and that birthed you. So that's motivation number one. Motivation number two is that my career, I'm a former banker, and I pivoted from banking into, I guess, economic development. So I used to work, my last gig before starting this effort is I worked for the state of New York, worked for the city of New York and the state of New York doing economic development. I happened to be working in the tech arena. I was in tech in 1996, like 1993, I was using the internet, right? And so I wanted to do what I was doing, economic development, back home, okay? So my love of back home and my love of and economic development, as you said, is not about spreadsheets. It's about wealth creation. And not wealth creation because everybody should be wealthy and, we are all money-minded. But in the society and world we live in today, wealth equals the ability to go to the doctor. It equals the ability to send your children to good schools. Wealth equals the ability to have legacy and to have a life that is not based on suffering, okay, or where suffering is a significant part of it. We all suffer, but I'm talking about financial suffering, right? And so my desire was to relieve the people of my community of that type of unnecessary suffering, and at the same time, relieve them of their suffering, but also do it at my place, in the place that I'm from. So we are absolutely, I'll just end here, we are absolutely an economic development agency. We are not we're not looking for unicorns. That's not what we do. We basically are helping people to create businesses, jobs, and wealth.
And yeah, I'd love to touch upon, it doesn't have to all be about building unicorns as well. I personally think there's way too much of an overemphasis on venture funding in particular, right? Government funding, grants, and other types of funding are great when an ecosystem is just getting up and started, but the venture funding is really way down the line. And honestly, in the earliest stages of an ecosystem, I actually think that it kind of is at odds with, building something sustainable, right? I mean, it's sort of the opposite. But so Ahmad, tell us about your motivations and so being a refugee from Syria, right? And just what were some of the first steps, your motivations, and what were some of the first steps that you started to take to kind of create this connectedness of this ecosystem virtually?
Yeah, absolutely. I know I also very much connect about what you said. This is the home. This is what I feel like I belong and what I wanted to do. My first motivation was when I mentioned I built a company that in 2010. We've been doing great. We raised fund, we raised product, put the product in the market, customer love it. But then everything around us changed. The whole country went into war. We had to close. The company used to call Joy Maker, but there was no more joy to make in the wartime. As I love to say, warlord called joy makers. So what happens after we left alone? There's all the venture capital left in my country, all accelerator program closed. There were like a handful of them, and then entrepreneurs left alone, and the whole youth and passionate people, they left alone. There was nobody to support the ecosystem that was barely about to be built, and it was now all completely destroyed. So what we do, there was an unemployment rate that hit 71%, 71%. So literally everybody graduating, everybody they are sitting doing nothing. And then we thought, rather than we sit, do nothing about it, how about and seeking job, how about we create the jobs? So it was out of more of necessity of we need to do something about it. So it was more like a grassroots building together, and that's motivated us, all of us, to do it. It's not one man job or one woman job to do a community. It's everybody's that in the community to help and to bring it up. So that's motivated us, all of us, to continue working and support each other. We did community activities, we did events, we contacted diaspora people to come, mentors. We literally hunted some people down to just like come and talk to us about how we can build products, global products, and how we turn our home into a place and a window that open us to different places around the world. Later, as the situation got harder, many of those people, many of those entrepreneurs had to flee the country. But the conflict does not stop there at the border of the country. It's still hunting them back, and now start to be stamped as refugees. And as refugees, you're not allowed to travel. You get visa denials. You cannot open a bank account. You have travel limitation restrictions. You cannot work. You have to wait till your asylum process get approved. That's an average take of 1.7 month, 1 year and 7 months. And you're just sitting with your idea and your brain that you want to do and you want to hack, but you're legally not allowed. Right. And that's also motivate us to like how we can build a community for diaspora. How can we build a community where distributed and very shattered all across. The people that we know, the mentors that we know, will live literally everywhere, and how we can connect all of those in one place and one umbrella out of this kind of necessity. I also mentioned about the unicorn, and you mentioned about the survival. I think it's many of the founders that I represented or I talked to is more like survival entrepreneurs. They wanted to create startups not because they want to become the next billionaires or I'm the next Elon Musk, rather than that's the only option left. This is the only things that I have that I wanted to do. What should I do? It's just hack an idea and build it. So it's not about calculating percentages. It's more about doing and acting and do that. So it's mostly the grassroots community was needed for the support, needed for take this initiative and lead this community. And this is something completely different that we try to see today. It's more also we have a top-down approach where governments say, oh, entrepreneurship is cool. Let's bring an entrepreneurship to our community. And we can talk more deeper about it. And then when they do so, they first reaction, let's build a massive innovation center. And there's no
slides and bean bags and ping pong tables.
Ping pong tables, and then entrepreneurs will come. And then eventually they don't come. So, okay, let's throw some cash in. And entrepreneurs will come, but they attract the wrong entrepreneurs. Real entrepreneurs, they will be in a different place. They will say, okay, those are the wrong people that we have. What should we do now? They say, okay, let's educate them about entrepreneurship and turn every entrepreneurship opportunity to training. People know exactly how to build the startups, and there is like a 1, 2, 3 how to build the startups. And then let's do more of events. Let's do more of activities. That approach happened like to be not working. This is not the right approach that I think it's relevant, and that's what excites me also to come here today to the panel to talk to you about it. What's worked, what did not work, and how we can all go back to the old times where we do grassroots community and start from within to go up.
Right, and I think there's a lot of analogies with just the startup way, right? You don't buy a big office and start printing all of this, marketing swag and all of this stuff, and you create an MVP, you get something to market fast, right? It's a bottom-up approach, and it's the same thing with ecosystems. We have seen this a lot too of one of the things that I hate to see, and I've seen it in way too many communities, is that when a government will come in and start to, hand out grants, right, to an ecosystem that's still in its nascency, it's still starting to grow, and then all of a sudden now all of these organizations that used to be very collaborative sort of become super competitive with each other, and now they are competing over the same dollars. Somebody's not mentoring in one program because they're mentoring in another, and all of a sudden everything just becomes super fragmented, right? So, yeah, anyway, I just wanted to rant on that because that's just the one thing that I see where I know the governments are coming in and they mean well, like, yes, entrepreneurs need capital and these programs need capital, but there's just a lot more intelligent ways that they could start to hand it out, because it's the teamwork mentality of the ecosystems is incredibly important. So it's a great segue into kind of this bottom-up approach, right? So I think we agree that it takes a bottom-up approach to get the ecosystems going, and you guys obviously have been some of those champions from the bottom-up approach. I mean, was this a solo thing? Were you like at that first stage when you were like, okay, I want to really start to bring this together? What was the first step? Were you starting to recruit others that shared the same passion?
My process was pretty straightforward, and I think it is exactly what you said in terms of building a company. So this initiative that I do called, in a collective way, Innovate Guyana, is my 6th startup, okay? So when I say that, I don't mean that I literally started 6 companies. I've been most of my life in corporate America, and so while I would have had the resources, my job has always been business development. And when people say, what is business development, it's sales, right, ultimately. And so what I have always had to do was go into an organization or go to a community, go to a group of people and sell them on why I want or why they should do something, right? And so what I started with is the why,
Yep.
right? And the why, in my particular case for Guyana, is that, so I should tell you that our incubator, accelerator, or Innovate Guyana focus is ag tech and agro-processing. Guyana happens to be a very sparsely populated country, but relatively speaking. But we're on the continent of South America, and so we are surrounded between Central America, the Caribbean, and South America by hundreds of millions of people. And in addition to that, we are an incredibly large manufacturer of, or exporter, producer of agricultural goods because of the land mass. And secondly, we are now, as of 2015, the 3rd largest oil producing country in the region, in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we also have the fastest growing economy in the world this year at about 38%. So what I said to myself was, I happen to love science and technology. That's what aside from banking, what my training, my work in economic development was. And so when I went into the community, when I went back home, I was looking for, how do I bring what I know how to do to here and make it useful, right? So what I observed is that we did not have any sort of real commercialization activity. I know that's unnecessarily fancy term for. We have people, smart people, coming up with ideas that involved agriculture, involved technology, involved agricultural manufacturing or agribusiness, and there was no formal sort of way for them to get support in order to turn these ideas into revenue generating, or these MVPs into revenue generating things. That happened because I happened to be, or I observed that because I happened to be visiting some colleagues at the university there. And I was sitting in an audience like you guys, listening to people do scientific presentations, not pitches, scientific presentations. And I heard the most amazing things. And I was like, well, what are you guys doing with this stuff? And they were like, what are you talking about? Like, I got recognized. I got a plaque. I got an award, for this great idea. And I'm like, but you're actually solving a problem with this idea. What are you guys doing? And so I went back to New York, and to directly answer your question, I started writing checks for my own savings. And it really started because I had identified the need, right? I had my own personal why, which was what I had said before about wanting to be back home doing something, applying my training, my skills. And I had other people in my community, the diaspora of the Caribbean, largely, but then also specifically of Guyana, including my family, who wanted to have a connection without having to physically go there and do things. So I brought all those things together, and that's how the company started. So it was absolutely not me, but I took all of these things that I was feeling and things I was seeing and sketched it out on a notepad on a plane, and then just started doing it. But I did that because this is my 6th time doing this.
That's what, because it sounds a lot like starting a startup, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're finding the business use case, coming up with the strong narrative, which I'm assuming you then took to some of the organizations in Guyana to get more support. What about you, Iman?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on one point. As you said, writing check, doing action. Taking action is the most difficult thing. Taking action, it's hard, especially at the beginning. You probably said, I'm starting solo or not. I did not start solo because I mentioned there was clear problem and there is a big vacuum in the community and everybody wanted to do something, but everybody was afraid to take this first action. Once we did the first action, and our first action was very simple, we did the Startup Weekend event. And within 2 days, if you're not familiar with the Startup Weekend's 54 hours event, people come to pitch an idea, find the co-founders, work on this idea for 54 hours, and get mentorship and support for them. So, and there's a max for this event. You get the 25 people because you cannot pitch for 3 hours. Within 2 hours, there's 400 people sign up, and then we had to close the registration. There was like during a wartime, and then we start asking what's motivate people to come, why they are coming, and how wars actually motivated people. And that's mostly my book about how wars actually motivate people to take actions, to change the status quo around them and be more leading that effort. So it was a small action that started like a snowball, and there's someone else who participated to say, oh, you know, I can, there's a problem with education. A lot of people cannot go to the school because of the war, and there's a risky things. How about we do it online? And can someone else designer said, oh, I can design it to be in easy things to share on a PDF or a voice note on WhatsApp, because that's easier because people don't have electricity and internet. And I was like, oh, great, that's one problem that we're facing as a society. Another problem, someone says, there's a lot of artisan people. Syria is known by handmade products that attract a lot of tourists back in the time to come and buy them. Now they left without the tourists to sell those products. Let's build a platform and let's ship to a third country, and from there start to work on it. And now the business to continue, and they're helping hundreds of artisans around the world. So that was also a second, like a snowball that start to raise, but all start with taking the first action. We go back to the problems. What are the small actions that I can take to bring those people together and like-minded community around me to come in? And that's take a huge bravery to be the first one or to take this action. Writing check from your saving. It's not an easy, it's like, why me? There's so many people who probably bullshitted than me, can write better check, bigger ones. Why should I do it? And that's back to the roots, why. And
But that's the calling part, right? Because if you think of something and you say just what this panel is, how do you build a startup community? But your initial thought is, well, let me go ask some other people. Then that's not that. Those two things don't match. I mean, if you are going to start the community, you have to do the work. Yep. It's really that simple. You have to marshal the resources. You have to write the check. You have to make the phone calls. You have to build a website. I had to build a website. I don't know, you know.
You learn it and do
You learn it and you do it. So it's very much a you show in the beginning, because even the people who say, I want to help, it's not their thing, it's your thing.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, just to add also quick things, that's it. I was lucky to see this community building that happened fast. Again, because probably there was a vacuum, there was like a huge need, it happens. Building community doesn't really need to happen next day or next week. So take action, but don't give up. Bradfield and the startup community says building community takes 20 years of commitment. Yep. So it's not something that I want to see now and it's happening today. It's going to take time. It's going to take huge effort, and it's not one person job. Once again, it's open for everybody. It should be community and inclusive. anybody from outside, no matter where they come from, their background, they can come and become a lead in this community. There is no head of any community, because then it's not a community, it's a, I don't know, organization, it could be, or whatever we want to call it. There's a hierarchy in it. There's a head of this community. If the community had left for some reason, the community will collapse. So there is no head of community. It's not a triangle. It's more like circle, and everybody's seated equally next to each other. So just to say, I was lucky to see it happening quick. We don't see it that in every community in all the places.
And I heard Jeff, he said a term yesterday that I thought really fit well. It was don't organize, catalyze, right?
That's good.
Because it's, and that, yeah, there's some knowledge in there from Brad Feld's Startup Communities book. You should read it if you haven't, but it's not trying to over-control it, right? Trying to own it. Obviously, it needs champions in the beginning, but then you have to sort of be willing to let it fly and be free, right?
There's a community way, so there's a second version of that. But.
So, so you had mentioned Startup Weekend, right? So I think as far as like a starting point, if you are going to start a community anywhere, it's usually, I'm a big proponent of just running events, right? I think an event is basically a minimum viable community in some ways, because you start to build a list, right? You get some speakers. Those are kind of the experts, the entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. Maybe you'll get a corporation to pay for some food or something, right? Now you're starting to build supporters, and then, and that list can grow and grow and grow. I know, Azleen, you're spearheading the Startup Huddle. Yeah. Do you want to, being a GEN event, do you want to just give us a quick overview of what Startup Huddle does and why you've been inspired to push that forward?
Sure. So I want to answer that by going back to this idea of community and how it gets started. So for us, and this might be the case for many people here if you don't live in like the US or Australia or Europe, right? Or even Canada, whatever, North America. It's in some places doing this work is kind of dangerous. And what I mean by dangerous is not necessarily exactly life-threatening, which in some cases it may be. I'm talking about it's a threat to establishment, right? And I'll give you an example. In the Bahamas, there is the Bahamas is in the Caribbean, for those who don't know. They have a stock market. And a colleague of mine, who's an engineer and attorney, started a crowdfunding platform. And it's called Arawak X because the Arawak native peoples were the first ones in the larger Caribbean. And this platform is absolutely brilliant. And there are some actors who have come in and tried to shut it down. So they've created problems so that they can no longer actually bring companies on. They actually have like 4 or 5 companies on the platform, and they've raised quite a bit of money. What's the point? The point is that when you're a disruptor, right, when you come in, you want to start something that could take away from someone else, and that someone else is an institution or a set of institutions, they will find a way to stop you. Right? So what was the case there? The case is there's a stock market, and here's this guy democratizing investing to the average person who doesn't have a brokerage account, isn't wealthy, but is now has a stake in, for example, some restaurant. And the restaurant's doing great. They're growing at 148%. So these people are now becoming wealthy. Well, then who needs the stock market, right? So we faced a similar thing. We do the huddles because Guyana is a very, it's a large country landmass-wise, and each of the communities has probably no more than a few thousand people. And so everything happens in the capital, which has the majority of people, and we are a virtual organization, but we do most of our work in the capital. So what did we do? We did 2 things. We set up all of our training, all of our activities, all of our funding, everything is virtual. So I get to still live in New York City and do this with my team of 12 people on the ground in Guyana. At the same time, we distributed this idea of finding really great talent. We run an incubator and an accelerator, but if you can't physically get to the city, then you're probably not going to participate, or you don't have great internet, which is the case, right? You live in what we call Region 9, which is the southern part of the country on the border with Brazil. Well, you don't have good internet, right? So you can't participate. So we distributed out the huddle chapters, gave them the training, and effectively they become a pipeline for us for the incubator and the accelerator out to outside of Guyana, where we go try to find funding, right? We, by the way, are funded by the US government, which is another issue, because we're potentially seen as subversive, right? Why is another government coming into our country to fund activity that ought to be done by our government? And I was saying earlier that I've been accused of being a CIA agent. So this stuff is not a joke, right? It's not easy. So the huddle helps us with our mission of creating wealth by enabling us to get the resources, the training, the coaching, the technical support, and the capital to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to participate. So.
And Ahmad, you had mentioned as well that you had run into kind of similar roadblocks a little bit as far, yeah, it's disrupting the status quo, right? And whenever you're doing that, and if the status quo is a government or is, heavily local organization that has a lot of influence, it's going to ruffle some feathers the wrong way. So what did you do when you kind of hit some of those hurdles?
Yeah, and I think, as I said, like entrepreneurship, it's also like a tool for many people. It's a mindset as well, and an ability to create something, and you solve your own problems. Those problems created probably sometimes on purpose, and those problems probably it's a systematic approach that done from the top and down to work on specific things. So entrepreneurship for many places is dangerous for many people. So back to the examples that I give, the government was asking, like, what do you mean someone else would provide education? And what education, and what tools, and what resources, and what you're going to learn? You're not going to teach what we're supposed to teach. It's our job, it's not someone else's job. So taking this out of some other people's hands make it a little bit dangerous. So that was one of the hustles, how to get people to convince, and how to give people hope, especially when we talked about community setting where there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of untrust, a lot of hope, how you can build trust again, and how you can get those people together. Another hardship that I faced in my time, also still facing till today, is how to find success. What's the purpose of this community, and how we define success? Is the success unicorn, as we hear on TV and the media every time, or is the success creating more jobs, or is this, if we talk about entrepreneurship or startup community specifically, what success in a startup means? Still today, there's still an argument. Until we reach a point, then success is what we think is good for our community. For our community was creating more jobs, so it doesn't have to be a very tech-heavy, savage company to call it the startups. It could be more traditional business, they finding their own way through some kind of disruption they make in the market, and that's fair, that's fine, if that's what we believe is success. So till today, we always face this problem. What's the purpose of this community? So once you lead your community and you start and taking action, then you're going to face those problems, how you can define the success of your community. And the other things that it always drowns the community is the activities, and that's not the purpose of the community. It's not the activities, not because I had 100 people attending an event, that means it's a successful event. What's the purpose? Are they connected? Did they talk to each other? Do they share numbers? Are they willing now to collaborate with each other? They would like the support. There's an outcome out of it. And a lot of times, sadly, we see communities drown into activities rather than the outcomes. So they confuse motion with motive, as I also say. How do you define success?
Yeah, I wanted to. I really
learn.
I really like that idea of defining success so that you know that you've gotten there on a certain level.
Yeah.
So I said at the outset that for us, it's about wealth creation, but it's a very long road to wealth creation, right? That means you actually have to have a product, you have to have, or a service, and you've got to be selling it and all of that. Well, you know, if you have ever run a business, as I said at the beginning, I'm a banker, and it's, I don't want to say it like this, but in order to build wealth, when you have started something and you want to sell it, you actually have to have figured out how to make money from selling it. And I don't mean make money as in, I made this thing and I sold it and somebody paid me. I mean, did you make a profit, right? Do you know what it takes to make a profit? Have you actually sized how many people are going to buy this product? Do you know what it cost you to make it? All those really boring accounting type things. We know we're successful when somebody who has an idea or who's running a business can actually show us the answers to those questions. That you actually can make money and sustain yourself, i.e. have a profit from what you're doing. And you have figured out exactly how to price this thing that you're selling, and you actually have somebody who said they're going to buy it. If that doesn't exist, then we're not doing what our community is intended to do. Our startup community is about wealth building. If you cannot show us, or show yourself more importantly, that you can build wealth, then we haven't succeeded. So we spend an inordinate amount of time. People are in our program for 2 years. So we don't do events, right? We run programs for 2 years and have cohorts. And at the end of that time, I can honestly say that every single entity that we actually work, because we provide funding. We don't just, So we write checks and we give you money. And once they get the money, they're accountable to us. They have to show us how they spent the money. They have to write reports, all of that stuff. And so the bottom line is our businesses are successful, and therefore we are successful because they actually wind up operating real businesses. And in operating real businesses, this is the second, they become part of the economy.
Yep.
Right? No more hiding out, only paying cash. We use, our telecom company has a, mobile payments. And so we force our people to use mobile payments. You don't have a bank account? No problem. You're going to take money by mobile payments. You're going to make payments by mobile payments. So we're very aggressive about this stuff because we need folks to be part of the formal economy so that they can create jobs and build wealth. So that's how we know we're successful.
It really is a great question, too. I know in the early days of FI, we were defining it as number of jobs created. That was the one, but it's an imperfect exercise. I remember we went through a whole day, like so many discussions of, okay, because to have a good metric, it has to be trackable, right? We have to feel like we have direct influence on it, all those the fun parts of setting KPIs, right? But then over time, we kind of shifted because that was just really hard for us to track. And we shifted towards a new entrepreneurs created. Right, and that essentially was to keep us in check. It was somebody that wasn't an entrepreneur, but now had started a company and they were able to work on it full time. Yeah. Right, at least not the perfect metric, but for us, it was something that we felt that we could directly influence because obviously if they're able to do that, then we've probably helped them raise funding or we've helped them get some traction and that kind of stuff. But for sure, defining those KPIs, it's a thankless exercise, I think, and it's going to vary depending on where you are and the type of organization you're trying to build. I mean, I think that's fascinating, a 2-year program. So for you, it really is, you will influence the fact that wealth is being created. Like, how do you measure that specifically?
So we have a very heavy hand. So they have to supply financial statements.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. That works.
I mean, we're not giving away $500.
Yeah,
it's a large amount of money, so we act like bankers. Yeah.
Yep. So we have about 10 minutes left here. I wanted to touch upon just collaboration and connectedness, right? I know it was in the description for this event, and obviously a lot of what we're doing here this week is trying to make connections. And in my opinion, one of the worst things that can happen to an ecosystem is kind of fragmentation and a couple of single players starting to like vertically integrate, right? Maybe it's a co-working space. Now they launch their own accelerator, then they launch their own fund, right? And now all of a sudden you've kind of create these like vertical tribes where people aren't working with each other, right? I'd love to hear if you guys have run into those issues and what you would recommend for some of the people in the audience today who are trying to build ecosystems, some of the steps that you took to kind of break down that. It's a natural inclination, right, for the organizations to compete, but to try to have a little bit more of a rising tide floats all boats mentality.
You also get the other side where it comes also with the good means, where a lot of people will say, oh, I want to do everything. I'm the community, I'm the co-working space, and I'm the incubators, I'm the fund, I supply you with the mentors, so you get everything. Someone like, it's a big problem, I want to do everything that it takes. It's more about, you need to know, you customize your own focus and work on it and say, this is what I do. That's it. This is what my niche, this is my expertise, my passion, and I'm going to do that. And I stop on this and try to build, motivate someone else to take a lead on the second thing, so it's better suited than I do. I liked also in the Pratt methodology and Boulder thesis and how Boulder kind of started, where they have a lot of founders meetings and ecosystem meetings, which are weekly gathering that's open for everybody. They come together just to collaborate and talk and discuss the ecosystem. So it's very kind of open invite for literally everybody to come around and say, oh, I take a lead on that, and I take also note on that, and how I can help, and each one step up and take a lead of the community. Not again, it's a one person, it's for everybody. But again, definitely when you're looking also for fund, you have to compete with someone else.
Sure.
To work on that and be able to run sustainably. Again, my case, I was lucky I'm doing this voluntarily. I have a full-time job. Back then at Texas, that was supportive for me to do all of that. I didn't need the funding, so it was like more bootstrapping from within the community itself. The diaspora, they fund the local people. To those activities, to the events, or if we could do an events or prior to research, I just did it publicly, publish it for free, just because needed people to hear their stories. It wasn't necessarily my own story alone. There was many people voices on that. It's a challenge that you need to balance. It's a challenge you need to find. I think now it's easier than before, because a lot of people start to realize the importance of openness, important inclusivity, important of entrepreneurship as a mindset, and they wanted to help and they wanted to support. There's more and more everyday options to take on, whether virtual or whether local, to help and work. Other things probably also, one thing that I helped, and I see it helping in many communities around the world, that's resonate with the collaborations. A lot of stories we hear about communities, they always look to find the one things they want to do now. And that probably would be how we can help the next startup to become unicorn, or to exit, or to grow to a certain extent. They find this own mission, and then let's put all our effort, all of our connections to one place, to one case study or one approach that's going to